So I got me that new Scott Joplin CD. You know, Scott Joplin from back in like the fucking 20s and shit.
He's a pretty cool guy.
Still alive somehow.
Yep.
But speaking of old ass shit, like that segue.
Yep.
We're on episode 7. 7, man. Can you believe it? It's episode 7. It's our 7th anniversary. By that I mean the 7th episode anniversary. We should actually be like on episode 52. There's literally like a movie for every week.
It's true.
We're barely on episode 7.
It's true.
But
it's because a lot of work goes into this video.
oh yeah, tons. But no, today we're talking about 1979's, which is a good, solid like 7 decades after Joplin.
Yeah.
1979's adaptation of Stephen King's seminal vampire novel, Salem's Lot. Of the same name, of course, Salem's Lot. And let's just start this sucker off by saying this. On my behalf, Salem's Lot is possibly, at times I think it's my favorite vampire novel, but Dracula is just too damn good. That's not to say that Salem's Lot is not good, of course. It's just Dracula is really fucking good. And considering Dracula is over 100 years old now, that says a lot that it's still that powerful. But Salem's Lot is like Stephen Sting.
He's a pretty cool guy.
Stephen Sting, the wrestler. No, Stephen King's like ode to gothic horror, and in a lot of way it mirrors Dracula. So, the structure of the book anyway, in a lot of way it mirrors Dracula, and it shares a lot of the same themes, and it has a lot of the same structure, but it's a much more depressing and kind of gloomy version of the events versus Dracula, which is really an upbeat. A lot of people don't know this, but Dracula is a Christian novel. I mean, not in the sense of like, Jesus, but in the sense of it was written by a Christian man, so the heroes are the heroes. Nowadays we live in a time where the villains are kind of our heroes, which is weird. But Salem's Lot indulged in that. It made the realism of evil a lot more present, which is why I kind of struggle with putting it in the first place or not. But did the movie achieve this or did it not? Did it achieve anything at all? We know this. It's considered a classic by a lot of people, and it was directed by a man now dead, unfortunately. And it's a shame they had to get beat up before he died. But the point is, it was made by a man that had already become a legend on his own in the horror field, and that's Tobe Hooper, who of course is most renowned for
drugs.
Tons of fucking drugs, and second to that, being beaten up.
Dying.
Third to that, dying.
Yeah.
But fourth, he's most renowned for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, among other fucking classics like Poltergeist and shit like that. Although apparently he didn't even direct that because he was on drugs.
Yep.
But Tobe Hooper is a master of horror, or was, I guess. unless he's a vampire, in which case he still is.
Yeah.
But he directed Salem's Lot. And the big question was, could this indie, out of nowhere, kind of like not professional guy direct something?
A TV movie.
A TV movie, no less, and make it effective. And it'd been a while since I'd seen Salem's Lot,
I've never seen it.
And again, it's your first time. I've always enjoyed the adaptation. And just off the bat, I'm going to say I still really, truly enjoy this adaptation. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty, picking apart as we want to do, about the things that I wouldn't even say adverse with. There's just things that I wish were there that aren't. And then there's things that are kind of there that I wish were in the book, etc., etc. But I think it's a smashing adaptation of the book.
Smashing?
Despite
what
lacking...
Is this, the 70s?
Yeah, well, yeah. No, the 20s. No, but it does lack one thread that I don't understand. To this day, I don't understand why they took this one thing out. I do and I don't. And I'll tell you exactly what that is. But I feel that if they had put this in there, and it's just the tiniest thing, that this thing would have been like almost perfect. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it. What's just your off-the-cuff thoughts on it to begin with? I know it's not something for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not for modern audiences.
Yeah, it's not.
Tell me
I really liked it. I didn't love it, but I really liked it. I do have some questions.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I could see.
But other than that, I did thoroughly enjoy it. I do feel like maybe they didn't put some stuff in there. I haven't read the book, so I don't know. But it does feel like some stuff was kind of held back a little. But that's just my opinion. I honestly, I don't know.
And we'll get into that. We'll discuss it. You're kind of right and kind of not about that. Your questions are valid. And it's not that they took out, it's that some things were altered. But they kind of go hand in hand, those two things. Yeah. So you're actually in the right frame of mind. But yes, it's definitely a movie. If you're familiar with horror like you are, horror fans will like this. Or I should say, not to sound like a pretentious douche, but educated horror fans will like this. Whereas, the people that just want to see blood and guts, you're not going to like this.
Yeah, it's very slow.
It is slow. It is paced. But that's for a reason. And I'll say this before we get into all the fucking details. And there's a plenty. I am, to this day, shocked how much of the book they got in there in the way they got it in there. And I say that because the way they got the majority of these things in there is not exactly the way the book got them in there. And it's just a sign of a person that knows how to adapt something without being 100% faithful. Yet, unlike the recent It adaptation, it didn't just go off and do its own thing, but still remain faithful. It's pretty much the book, only it had to do certain things to get to certain points a bit differently. So one of the things it does is the book is much more about the town as it is about the vampire and the evil. So one of the things it does is it combines a lot of these characters and threads in the town into characters. So some characters represent 2-3 characters, but they're combined into one, and it's not off-putting for someone that's read the book because you can see why they did that.
Like, what do you mean, in the movie?
Yes, in the movie. Like Larry Crockett, the real estate guy?
Yeah.
He was just Larry Crockett, the real estate guy. He didn't have the lover. Those two characters were on their own thread, and they never really crossed paths. And the moving guys and Ned Tibbets, whose name in the book is Floyd Tibbets, the guy that beats up the main character, he's on his own. But here they've given you in the movie they've given you a swatch of the town's people, but they've interlinked them so that it's more fluid.
I actually like that. It seemed like all the characters, or it didn't seem, it actually was that all the characters were kind of connected.
Yeah.
Which made I wouldn't say the slower parts, but the slower parts kind of more interesting because like, how are these people going to connect together in the end? I didn't know that there were people. It was like characters put together. And
I think they do it for one of the major reasons, and it's one thing that I said at the beginning. This is the one thing that I kind of like wish was there, but this kind of like makes up for it in a way. By interlinking all these people in some way or another to each other, to the events as they go on, as you say, eventually they come together at the end. By interlinking them, they give an excuse for the filmmakers to kind of keep Barlow, the vampire, in the dark for a long fucking time. And that could go horribly wrong or it could go horribly right. I think it horribly right, and that's not even a thing, but it could go horribly wrong or it could go fucking fantastic. And I think that the movie does that, and I think it does it right, and I think it achieves it only because of the aesthetic and stylistic choices that Tobe Hooper made as a filmmaker. And I say that because this movie is Tobe Hooper's ode to Hammer horror movies. It's structured like one, it looks like one, the music is straight out of it, the characters feel like it. Even the way the looping and stuff, it sounds like those movies, the bright, colorful palette, the hazy, the fog, all that stuff is straight out of a Hammer movie. And Tobe Hooper knew that on television he was restricted. He couldn't do certain things that are in the book. But he also knew what Stephen King was doing. And Stephen King was tipping his hat to the old Gothic horror of yesteryear. And Stephen King was tipping his hat heavily towards Dracula. And Tobe Hooper did the same thing, only in his adaptation of the Stephen King book, he tipped his hat towards the people that brought us the more modernistic and kind of sexy Dracula, and that's Christopher Lee. But the odd thing is that instead of putting the Christopher Lee kind of vampire, he gave us the Nosferatu, which was you know, the Nosferatu Khan Orlok looking vampire
Yeah.
of old. So he did kind of a weird switcheroo there. In the book, Barlow is much more like Christopher Lee. In fact, when he's described, he looks like Christopher Lee. He's got the mustache, he's got the suave European looks, you know, all that stuff. And so this is what I say. This is what I kind of wish they could have still done it with this weird looking vampire. In the book, Barlow is a presence. He's very much kept in the dark. Don't get me wrong, just like in the movie. But what he does is he exploits the inherent evil, quote unquote, of the town. And by evil, I don't mean like people are horribly malicious. I mean like that chick that was cheating on her husband with that guy. That's a form of evil, you know.
Yeah.
That's a dishonesty of a sort, you know, adultery, etc. And you know, there's different characters in the town, you know, that have just that one little thing that is just waiting to tip over. People just want an excuse to be evil, and that's a major theme in the book, you know. And they touch on it in the movie a lot in terms of the house is evil and it attracts evil, and because of that, evil grows. In the book, it's much more prominent. The house is evil, it attracts evil, but when evil gets there, evil grows because it wants to grow. And the vampire is just exploiting it. So he touches on what people want. And there's one thing that I feel, even if they didn't put the vampire in there influencing people, there was one scene that I felt could have said that real quickly. And that's when the guy, Larry Crockett's wife, Larry Crockett's secretary is doing her cheating with Larry Crockett himself, you know, and the husband comes in and catches him, right?
Yeah.
And he runs, you know, he scares him with a shotgun and he runs out, and then you see the vampire's hand in the
And then
book.
you get that really stylistic.
Yeah, you get
zoom
that. You get that zoom in, and
70s zoom in.
And I really actually like that because again, it harkens back to the Hammer horror.
Yeah,
films and stuff
I
like
mean,
that.
at first I was like, whoa, but I was like, all right, I kind of get it.
It was impacting, it was shocking,
Yeah.
you know, it worked. But that one scene, if they could have done that, it was fine if they excluded the rest of the vampire stuff, which they did anyway. But in the book, Barlow appears to Crockett, and well, to be fair, in the book, Crockett is not Crockett; it's just some guy that's cheating on him. But you know, to that equivalent, appears to him and basically offers him a chance for revenge. And it's that lures him into the van. So it touches on the idea of there's evil already in people.
Would make. Yeah, because see, I was a little confused about that storyline.
Yeah.
It was interesting, but I was like, okay, what did that lead to?
Yeah,
Him dying?
exactly.
Okay. So yeah, that would have been more interesting.
Yeah, and I feel it could have
Not
been.
that it was bad. I was actually quite intrigued by that storyline. It was just like confusing where it went.
Yeah, the movie does bring across that eventually. It's just maybe a bit hard to see at first, but the idea that there's something in the town that it is feeding, and vice versa, the vampire is feeding off of to spread its vampire disease is there. It's just much more rich and prominent in the book. And there's one character, and I realize why they didn't put him in the movie. It would have been just some character that they literally couldn't link to all these other characters the way they kind of expertly linked them all. There's this guy. He's the town dump guy, you know, the trash man, if as it were. He's not even the trash man. He's the guy that takes care of the dump. And he loves shooting rats, and he loves being dirty, and don't give a fuck. But he lusts after this one girl in town. And again, it's just some random girl in town, you know. And the vampire, this is when the vampire makes its kind of grand entrance. You've seen him throughout, but it's only during attacks, kind of like, you know, the prompt attack. But the guy, this trash man, he loves burning the fire, I mean, the trash in the dump and watching it burn, you know. There's a destructive streak in him. And this is the first time we see the vampire, and he appears like very Christopher Lee, very noble, very alluring and dark and swarthy and whatever. And he's just next to him all of a sudden. The fire is burning and lighting his face, you know, and he tempts him with the idea of, you can have that woman. Look at you, you're disgusting, but you can have her if you just come to me, you know. And again, it just brings in that idea of there's inherent evil in this town. That's the one thing I wish was in there that it isn't. But what they did with this little swapperino that they did, though it being an ode to the Hammer horror films, they kind of made Barlow like this mute monster, and it was actually Straker, his familiar, which I know you were like, what's up with this guy?
Yeah.
Is he, what? Why is he powerful?
Because, yeah, suddenly they show him being like the strongest guy on Earth, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, he's just his familiar, his caretaker, as it were, and not a vampire all out, but, one would assume eventually he would grant him the dark gift, so to speak. But anyway, they make him much more of the controlling figure in terms of the action, but he still serves as master, which I think gave the vampire a unique kind of like dirty, animalistic twist.
It was interesting. It was odd, though, to me.
Yeah, it is striking. It is very different.
Because yeah, he does seem kind of like this weird creature. Like it doesn't seem like a smart creature. It just seems like a dumb, attacky creature. But then he's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was odd.
Yeah, it was definitely an odd choice to give voice to his motives through somebody else.
Yeah.
But it was a unique choice.
It was cool because you kind of see his influence. But at the same time, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, especially because that's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are used to kind of like the smart, world-weary, been on the earth forever, knows everything vampire, the romanticized vampire.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Tobe Hooper intentionally, or maybe the scriptwriter, intentionally kind of turned that against us.
I kind of liked it because it is very like Nosferatu-esque. In that, like, he's kind of hiding all the time and is hideous. But yeah, it was odd. It just wasn't what I expected.
So anyway, let's
especially because you mostly only see him when he attacks people,
yeah,
or when he's in his coffin, and you rarely see him. You kind of see his like little vamp pals, I guess.
And yeah, man, you're absolutely right. But and again in this format, that kind of did allow for the idea of this is spreading.
Yeah, yeah, it did.
Like a disease would. 2 times 2 times 4.
Yeah.
Like so it did help. It's just such a unique approach to it.
Yeah,
I'm not disappointed by it despite the changes, and that it completely captured the spirit of it. Despite excluding certain things that were so pivotal to it. It's very strange. I do highly recommend the book above the movie, but they are pretty much the same thing, except for that, again, the influence of the vampire is super cool in the book, despite him barely being there, like in the movie. It's strange. But anyway.
Yeah, I would have liked a little more of him, because you do see him very little. That being said, I think the first time they do show him was kind of weird, like in a good way, like kind of disturbing. The sound he's making and shit.
Oh yeah.
And then it comes so abruptly in the movie where like you're like, all right, I guess we're gonna see him till the end, and then suddenly he's there, and you're like, okay, that's cool.
And I don't know about you, but every time he comes on screen, it has kind of like the same effect, like a jarring.
Yeah, because of how the movie is structured. So when you see this like weird creature, you're like, all right, that's kind of works. Even though like through most of the rest of the movie, I was like, man, I kind of want this guy to be here. Whenever he would appear, I was like, all right, I get why they did that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, but let's get to the nitty gritty here. The characters and the actors they portray, again, as I've aforementioned, a lot of the characters are kind of blended versions of themselves, with the exception of our main cast, which pretty much as it is in the book. Maybe. Let me just call this to attention. Father Callahan has a bigger role in the book, but I understand why they kept it as it is. Those are the 2 big scenes in the book that he has, the ones that he has in the movie. And his story is left hanging for a reason, which later ties into the Dark Tower series. So I understand why they didn't fully put him in there. But the scenes he had, especially the confrontation with the vampire, was super cool. Because, again, it underlined the idea of faith hurts this vampire. Which, again, is brought up with Ben Mears' character. He's a Baptist, but here he is resorting to crosses and, the Holy Father and what have you. And again, it's themes that he visits again, like in It and stuff like that. The idea of faith hurting the monster, which is really cool and really works, especially in a vampire story. But yeah, the characters, anybody that didn't strike you, is particularly, good? Or
I thought everybody was good. I can't think of anybody who sucked. There was, like I said, there was that weird that plot line that I was not very
with
yeah,
Crockett.
I wasn't too like knowing where that was going, and even when it ended, I was like, okay, it was cool, but I was confused by it a little. But I thought everybody was fine.
Yeah, and there's a particular. I mean, we're not talking like stellar fucking actors here, but
It kind of it works.
It lends to the. You know, like old Hammer movies felt like stage plays, like these vibrant, colorful stage plays that are filmed, and this kind of feels like that.
Yeah.
They have that weird demeanor,
yeah, everybody's just a little off.
Yeah, but it works. It works. Whether it was intentional or not, I mean, the movie says it was, but I don't know if they picked the people intentionally for that or they were just fuck it, it's gonna work this way, you know. But it works. Yeah, everybody's pretty good. Nobody of big note here. No big name actors or anything like that.
Fred Willard was in it.
Fred Willard, yeah.
There you go.
But our main characters are portrayed relatively loyally to their book counterparts, and yeah, man, pretty cool all around. I did enjoy what's his name? That guy that I can't remember. Straker. I thought he was pretty cool, man. Straight out of a Hammer.
He was pretty good. If he hadn't worked, there would have been a lot more problems with the movie.
Yeah, definitely. But thankfully he did, and he had a real presence.
Even though it was like, what the hell was he so strong all of a sudden? Picking up dudes and shit.
Now let's talk about the aesthetics of this movie, which again I think harken back and touch upon a lot of these old school Gothic films that Hammer and Amicus and all these old, English production companies churned out in the 60s and 70s and stuff, and 50s. And did you enjoy that aesthetic, or did you think it detracted from it?
I liked it. It does look like a 70s movie, like when it comes to people, but it does have that like kind of older movie look that you speak of. Everything is really bright, but I liked it. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And it kind of makes the scenes where it is like lit dark. It's like, oh, that's interesting. That's different.
Yeah, there's a color palette even in the dark. Yeah, it's really cool. And then you even get some Toby Hooperisms in there as far as camera movements and stuff. There's some really cool shots in this that I think maybe go unappreciated a bit because of the length of the movie.
Yeah.
But they're in there and they're really cool. Like especially I'm thinking of the Gravedigger when he's falling under the thrall of the Glick boy that he's just interred, and he's just staring, and he's got this cool little camera movement going on that really kind of resonates with what's going on, and it makes you feel the pull of the vampire versus just, hey, what's up? I'm a fucking vamp over here. Come get me. He's Danny DeVito. Get over here. Apparently he's fucking Joe Pesci also. But anyway. But yeah, I love the aesthetic.
There's even like I especially like the scenes with the visiting vamps, the kids.
Oh yeah, really nice.
Where it just kind of has that like off look, like they clearly did something to make it look different. I don't know if it was reversed or something, but sometimes the smoke is going into them.
Yeah.
And then there's that bit where he's gonna bite the kid, and it's kind of looks like it's just reversed. I don't know if it was or not, but it kind of just gives it a weird
otherworldly feeling.
Yeah, like another, like the slight offness in the movements, or like the smoke is going in or the fog is going in, kind of was interesting. And if you don't, it's really easy to miss, but it's there.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cool, kind of like ambiance to those scenes. Yeah, like otherworldly, kind of like almost like you're alone with the vampire yourself. And I love that the palette behind him is solid black.
Yeah.
There could be trees outside. Not anymore. It's just solid black. And this thing, it really gives visually the impression of you're now under their thrall. They're influencing them, which was really fucking cool. One of my favorite scenes, and this kind of ties in with the aesthetic of it, is when Mark's parents are talking to Father Callahan, and Barlow makes a grand entrance, and he just kind of booms in through the window after affecting the environment around them, and rises out of this.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was super cool, man. And you know, that stuff like that has been imitated since then in horror, either consciously or unconsciously. But
that being said, really the scene did end a little weird, and the kid goes, "I'm gonna kill you," and then it cuts to Barlow and he goes, "Huh?" I was like, "What the flip?"
I mean, if somebody said that, vampire or not, you're gonna be like, "Huh?"
That was a little.
That's
weird.
my reaction to death threats.
That was a little weird. Like, I was like, "Oh, he's not gonna talk," because I was expecting him to talk. Because I've never seen the movie. I've only seen like pictures and stuff like that. And I always had the assumption that he was gonna be like a talking vamp. So to see him just kind of growl and go in that scene, I was like, okay, this is weird. Cool. Especially the first time you see him with those weird, like almost like wolf-like sounds he makes. It was kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was odd. I was like, okay. Mind you, it's kind of cool because it's implied that he's controlling the people through different means. You know, and they keep saying don't look at their eyes.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is cool because it's like, all right.
It's interesting that you bring that up because it segues perfectly into this little nugget. In the book, Barlow is like I said, he just looks like Christopher Lee basically, right? And he does talk and he communicates. But later, in the Dark Tower series and other extraneous sources in the Stephen King's universe, we find out through Stephen King that Barlow was a type 1 vampire. And there's 3 types of vampires, and he's type 1, i.e. one of the oldest, I guess the root foundation of vampiredom. You know, he's one of those guys. And they're described as bald, full of a mouthful of a bed of teeth, and they really don't speak. They more like influence through the mind. So I wonder often, did he look at this and go, huh, that's pretty cool. I'm going to put that in the book, you know?
Even if you don't know that, if you've seen it or read the book, it's kind of like, oh, it's an interesting connection and the control that they have.
Yeah, yeah. So, that was pretty interesting. It's something he touches on later, again, like in the Dark Tower, and themes that recur also in like books like it. And most notably in The Night Flyer, which centers around a type 1 vampire, which a lot of people think or posit the possibility that he is actually Barlow. Maybe not. I don't think so myself. But that's another movie we'll be checking out. But it's just interesting. Maybe he just picked up on that and said, hey, that's pretty cool. Or maybe type 1 vampires could just look however the fuck they want. But the point is... that's the point.
I'm not gonna lie, I laughed out loud during that scene.
Yeah, you did. Now let's talk about the effects of this little baby here. Now this was the 70s, so you have to make some concessions. And if you're not a fool, you're gonna go, oh, that's cool, especially for the time. Or if it sucks, you're gonna go, that just sucked. Period.
Yeah.
So did you think the effects were effective? Like that?
There wasn't a lot of effects. There was a dog that looked fake as shit.
It was kind of cute.
It was cute, but I was like, I mean, that's not a dog.
That's a fake dog.
But other than that, I thought the vamp makeup was really cool. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't think of what. The
Evil
whole
Dead
time.
2?
Maybe, yeah. I guess, yeah. It is
kind of like an Evil Ed looking-ish.
Yeah, it is. It looks like something that could only work in the 70s.
Yes.
Somehow. Because of the look of the movie, it helped the look of the effects a lot. And Barlow looked cool. Barlow looked really cool, I thought. Until the scene where he's in his casket and you kind of see the seams of the makeup. But even then, whatever. It's a movie, right? You're gonna see that eventually, especially how brightly lit the movie was.
Yeah.
But other than that, I thought all the effects were pretty good.
Yeah, Barlow is
especially those scenes with the weird like floating vamps. All that stuff looked really cool.
Barlow, to me, of course, and to most people, I guess, is the shining effect here, and he does look fantastic, and he does have a kind of like weird presence that's not only dependent on the effects, of course, but the effects sure as hell add to it. I mean, undoubtedly. And yeah, the vamps look really cool, really unique, and yet very old school, and yet very new school. It's pretty cool. I absolutely love this grin they always have on them. Well, not always, but sometimes it really, oozes maliciousness and kind of like a lascivious nature to them, the dirtiness of them, which is cool because that's exactly how it feels in the book. Really cool effects. Even the effects that, obviously because of the time and budget constraints, don't 100% work, still kind of work. A good example is Marjorie Glick when Ben and
oh yeah,
I forgot his name, the school teacher, are looking over her body, and she comes back, and eventually they make her body dissipate is the point of it.
Yeah.
But she just kind of vanishes.
Like she disappears.
Yeah. But the little touch afterwards where the stuff kind of goes towards where she was.
Yeah, you kind of get it.
You get the point of it. That kind of like Witch King dying kind of effect.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Now, that being said, they did it with her, but they didn't do it with Barlow, which was kind of a thing for me. Because his death is really spectacular in the book. It's the same death, basically. But when he dies, the way they communicate in the movie is we're seeing the other stuff in the room. It takes a long time for him to die versus the other ones. But it's a much more visual feast. And obviously they didn't have the money for that. So they kind of just show him, and he's taking a while to die, but they're not showing him directly. Yeah. Just him screaming maybe. And then eventually show the skull with the flesh. It's a longer process. It would have been cool to see that, but I think it communicates it pretty well.
Yeah, it wasn't a spectacular looking scene, but it worked.
Yeah.
So.
Now, I will say this about the movie. The movie does, again, it shifts the order of events a bit so that things come together in a certain way a lot quicker. I know that's kind of like, what? Quicker?
Yeah.
But
it's a long one.
As a result of that restructuring, it seems a lot more paced, is what I'm getting at, because the way the book is structured, the events and the happenings of the vampires and all that stuff actually come in different spots. So here, because of the restructuring, they're kind of like, it takes a while for them to get there.
Yeah.
That being said, it was necessary. One thing that I thought was really cool was the epilogue and the prologue are restructured. In the book, of course, it begins with Ben and Mark, and they're in Mexico, and they've been running from this, but they're not necessarily actively running from it. They're not necessarily being pursued per se as aggressively as they are in the movie, which I thought was a cool little touch.
Yeah.
That the vampires that remained in Salem's Lot still were actively pursuing them because the master was killed. I thought that was a really cool touch in the movie, and I love that they brought Susan in at the end, because in the book, I'm kind of at odds with this. I like that they brought her in for that last, attempt, big attempt from the vampires to lure them into the trap, but I really like what's done in the book. And in the book, Susan is actually used by Barlow as a trap, not even a trap, as a taunt, because he's so sure that he's going to win at the end. No matter how many vampires they kill, he's sure that he's going to win, that he leaves her behind at his house, at the Marston house, to taunt them, and they have to kill her. So it's a really impactful scene. And then they find out that this whole time he's been hiding at the same boarding house that Ben's been staying at. So that, all the vampires sleeping and shit in the little coffin, that actually takes place over there in the boarding house. I thought that would have been really cool, but considering how they changed the epilogue and the prologue, it was actually pretty cool in the movie too. So they both have their benefits and their merits.
Why was Barlow locked in a crevice? It was just to no one gets to him?
In the book, he was hiding. That's why that would have made much more sense. He was hiding because he was being pursued. People knew that he was a vampire.
Okay.
So he put himself in the boarding house in this, kind of like the one in the Marston house in the movie.
Yeah.
He put himself in that area. So one, it's the last place they're going to look, right under your nose. And two, he's literally hidden in a hidden portion of the house. And he's being protected by all his acolytes and minions. So it made a lot more sense in the book, but it also kind of worked a lot in the movie, so I'm not completely at odds with it. But I would have really liked for Barlow to have taunted them with the Susan thing. That would have been really cool. But it worked, man. So anyway, let's talk about the score in this. I fucking love this score. It's really omnipresent. It's like always there.
Yeah.
And it's really old school. You don't even want to say orchestral because there's no definite structure. There's one classic pick, I think, classical music pick in the whole picture, I think, maybe two. I can't recall, but
It's
there's
so
one for
long.
sure.
I don't
But
know
the
the
rest
beginning.
is it's just this like instrumental
Yeah.
crescendos and highs and stings and stuff. That's really again really old school horror, and I love it, man. It worked really well. Did you think it worked? Did it get in your way?
No, I liked it, and it kind of comes off as, it's weird, but it kind of comes off as classy horror.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Like it kind of gets you in like that mind frame where like, all right, I'm not gonna see any excessive gore or teats. It's gonna be a different kind of horror, if that makes any sense. And occasionally there was a little bounciness to it.
Yeah, you remarked that it kind of reminded you of Beetlejuice scores.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3. No, there's like one time in the movie where I was like, "Oh, that's Beetlejuicean," and then the last credit is like,
Yeah.
"Well, that's very Beetlejuicean." Yeah, I liked it a lot. It was a pretty cool score.
Yeah, it really stands out. I mean, it's one of those that you could listen on its own and enjoy it thoroughly.
It's very much a vampire
Yes.
movie score, if that makes any sense.
Again, very reminiscent of the Hammer and Amicus
Yeah.
stuff, which is cool because it totally lends to what's being presented on the screen. Okay, man, so it's time to call it all. Is this a hit or is this shit? Give us a final rating and tell us some final thoughts.
I think it's a hit overall.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there was some stuff that was a little confusing to me, but
I will say this before you continue that thought. The more times you see it, the less confusing, because they're packing a lot of information into this thing. So, it becomes clear. Some of the plot lines and stuff becomes clearer the more you see it. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
But yeah, this is definitely not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's very slow. It's long. We're talking like at 3 hours probably.
3 hours and some minutes, yeah.
But it doesn't feel very long. I'll say that. I'll say the first chunk is very much story and very much like build up, but it's interesting, so I didn't mind it. And yeah, once it gets to a
once it reaches a crescendo.
There you go. Once it picks up steam is what I was thinking of.
I like the steam engine.
It gets very interesting, and I like that feeling that the part at the end that's 2 years later had.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of gave it that feeling of like the Phantasm movies have,
Yes.
where they're like in a constant.
I am so glad you said that.
Which is a hard thing to accomplish, but I would like to see a movie continuing that. Or not continuing that, but of that, because of how fast they achieve that feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked the movie. A little bit confusing at times, or some plot lines are a little confusing, but overall it's really cool. And
Final rating?
Rating, I'll give it like an 8.
Mm-hmm.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Pretty good. Yeah, man. Upon rewatching this, it remains as good as it was. Like you said, this is not for everyone.
No.
If you're a fan of old school horror, this is for you. If you're a fan of vampires when they used to be threatening, this is for you.
Yeah, if you don't mind a slow grind.
Yes, if you are all for build up that pays off, this is for you. It is a very specific type of horror film. But if it's your bag, you're gonna enjoy the fuck out of it. So give it a shot. It may be your thing. For sure, though, give the book a shot because it's a fucking classic for a reason. It's fantastic. I give a 10 to the book, and I give a solid 8 to the movie because it is that good, and it is very worthy of its classic status. So it's definitely a hit for both of us.
The Blu-ray looks really good, too.
Yes, the Blu-ray looks exceptional. Good warning to take heed of. There is a theatrical cut of this that you should not see. Because if you thought all those storylines were confusing sometimes before they come together, imagine all that shit just cut to like weird shreds.
Yeah.
And then nothing like makes sense story-wise. So don't see the theatrical cut.
That's the thing. Like, even if I was a little confused by a storyline, I was interested because of all the characters being weaved together so well.
You know what this reminds me of a lot, and which we will venture into in a further episode? Storm of the Century. I think Storm of the Century is much better paced. It uses the million townspeople a lot better than this. But Although that might change when we rewatch it, but it has that similar feeling. It has to build up these stories to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And you either can get into that or you can't. But hopefully you can, and you enjoy it as much as we did. Tell us what you think. This has been Ahab.
There is a sequel.
There is a sequel, and there is a remake. We will for sure be checking out the remake.
And we might check out
the sequel.
Larry Cohen.
Yeah, Larry Cohen directed it. I've never seen that one. So
and it's mixed.
We'll see. But anyway, this has been Ahab. That's the Goon Tick. Hit like, share, subscribe. Remember, turn on your notifications so that you can get our bullshit when it comes out. Because we release a lot of shit. So, the notifications help. If you just subscribe and there's no notification, you're going to be like, whatever happened to those fat assholes? Answer, we were churning shit out. You just weren't watching it. But the point is, we're signing out.
How the hell does Barlow come back?